You know, one of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves is that people didn't mean to hurt us, that it was an accident, a moment of weakness, a slip of the tongue, but deep down we know better. There's a difference between someone making a mistake and someone making a move. There's a difference between ignorance and intent. And you felt the difference, didn't you? They didn't just stumble into your heart and trip over your trust. No, they walked in with their eyes wide open. They knew what they were doing when they said what they said. They calculated the timing, they weighed their words, and they decided to wound you anyway. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a mission. And when you start to wake up to that reality, it shakes you. It shakes you because it wasn't a stranger who hurt you, it was someone you let in. Someone you prayed for, someone you defended, someone you would have done anything for. And yet, they chose to damage you with full knowledge of the damage they'd cause. You see, the enemy doesn't always come dressed in red with horns. Sometimes he comes dressed in loyalty, in love, in family. And when the knife finds your back, it doesn't always feel like betrayal. At first, it feels like confusion. It feels like, how could they? It feels like maybe I misunderstood, but you didn't. You didn't misunderstand. You just didn't want to believe it. You wanted to believe they were better. You wanted to believe they were still who they used to be. You wanted to believe the history you shared meant you were safe. But history doesn't equal honor. Time doesn't equal trust. Some people don't change, they just get better at hiding who they really are. And when the mask falls, don't pretend you didn't see it. When someone reveals their intention to harm you, don't cover it up with excuses. Don't explain it away. That pain you felt was real. That silence you sat in after they left you broken, that was real. That ache in your spirit, the one that kept you up at night questioning your worth, that was real. And they saw all of it. They saw what they did. They saw how it hit you. And they didn't flinch. They didn't check on you. They didn't say, I'm sorry. And if they did, it was only because they feared losing control. Not because they feared they had lost you. Don't let your compassion make you blind. Some people aim when they hurt you. They wait for the perfect moment. They study your weaknesses. They learn your patterns. They dig into your past. And when the time is right, they strike not by accident, but with precision. And you call it love. You call it friendship. You call it family. But love does not aim to break. Real love protects. Real love holds. Real love doesn't twist the knife when you're already on your knees. So many of us keep reopening the door to the very people God rescued us from. We keep saying they didn't mean it. Maybe they were just having a hard time. And listen, grace is beautiful. But grace without wisdom becomes bondage. Forgiveness is a command, but foolishness is a choice. God never asked you to hand your heart back to the one who shattered it. He told you to guard it, to protect it, to walk in truth. And the truth is, if they hurt you on purpose, they will do it again. Stop giving second chances to people who used the first one to destroy you. Stop thinking loyalty means tolerating pain. Stop measuring love by how much you can endure and start measuring it by how much you are respected, honored, and protected. You deserve relationships that uplift you, not ones that break you and blame you for bleeding. And I know it's hard. I know it feels like losing. I know it feels like letting go of a part of yourself. But you're not losing your learning. You're not letting go of love. You're letting go of a lie. You're making room for what God really has for you. And sometimes the only way to receive the right thing is to release the wrong one, no matter how familiar it feels. Don't water down your pain just to keep someone around. Don't minimize what they did because you're afraid of being alone. God doesn't ask you to lie to yourself in order to love someone else. If they damage you intentionally, that's not love. That's manipulation. That's control. That's darkness wearing a mask of light. And it's time to expose it for what it is. Not to shame them, not to get even, but to free yourself. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful gifts God has given us, not just for others, but for ourselves. When we forgive, we release the poison, we lay down the weight, we break the chain that tries to bind us to bitterness. But let me tell you something plain and true. Forgiveness is not the same thing as access. Forgiving someone does not mean you hand them the key to your peace again. You see, we've been told so often to forgive that we forget to be wise. We think that if we truly forgive someone, we have to let them back into our lives. We think we have to pretend nothing happened. We think we have to restore the same closeness, the same trust, the same open door they once walked through to us. But that's not forgiveness, that's forgetfulness. And there's a difference. God calls us to forgive, yes, but He never called us to be fools. He never said, let the wolf back into the sheepfold just because you prayed for him. There are people you have forgiven in your heart, but they are not meant to walk with you in this next chapter. They were part of your wilderness, not your promised land. And just because you let go of the grudge doesn't mean you need to grab their hand again. Some of us are exhausting our souls trying to love people back into decency. We think if we forgive enough, pray enough, stay enough, they'll change. But sometimes God allows distance so you can hear Him clearly. Sometimes the separation is the protection. And if you keep giving access to the ones He's trying to remove, you're not walking in forgiveness, you're walking in disobedience. Forgiveness says, I release you. It says, I refuse to carry this anger any longer. But it also says, I choose to protect the peace God gave me, because that peace, it came at a price. You cried for that peace. You fought for that peace. You had to drag yourself out of some dark places to find that stillness again. Why hand it back to someone who didn't value it the first time? Letting someone back in just because you've forgiven them is like handing a thief the keys to your house because you prayed about the last robbery. That's not healing, that's self-sabotage. Some people are sorry they lost access to you, not sorry they hurt you. They don't miss you because they love you, they miss you because you were easy to use. You were always there, always kind, always forgiving, and they counted on that. They took your grace for weakness. They took your patience for permission. And now that you found your strength, now that you're starting to see clearly, they want back and not to love you right, but to reset the same cycle. That's why you must learn to forgive and protect. You can pray for someone from a distance. You can wish them well without welcoming them in. You can carry love in your heart without carrying their weight in your life. God isn't judging the access you give, He's watching the boundaries you keep. People will say, but didn't you forgive them? And your answer can be, yes, I just learned not to trust them again. That's not bitterness, that's clarity. That's not vengeance, that's wisdom. The same God who told you to forgive also told you to guard your heart. And you cannot guard what you keep handing over to those who only know how to break it. The world might tell you forgiveness means reunion, that it means everything goes back to normal. But you know better. Forgiveness is between you and God. Access is between you and discernment. And if God is closing a door, don't prop it open out of guilt. He knows what you don't. He saw the conversations behind your back. He heard the intentions they never spoke. He knows the harm they planned while smiling in your face. And sometimes His protection looks like isolation. Sometimes His mercy feels like loneliness, but trust me, it's deliverance in disguise. You don't owe anyone access just because you've forgiven them. That's not pride, it's preservation. It's honoring what God has restored in you. So bless them, release them. Pray for them. But stop giving front row seats to people who clapped when you fell. Stop inviting pain into places God has healed. Stop handing the pen to people who already tried to erase your story. They didn't just hurt you by accident. No, it went deeper than that. It wasn't a moment of anger or a slip of emotion they planned it. They watched you closely. They studied your kindness. They listened when you spoke from your heart. They observed what made you light up, what made you silent, what made you trust. And with all that information, they chose to wound you. That's what makes it hurt so much. That's what makes it hard to understand. Because it wasn't just the action, it was the awareness. They knew you. They knew the battles you were already fighting. They knew the pain you were still healing from. They knew you were vulnerable in that moment. And instead of covering you, instead of protecting you, they used it all against you. That's not immaturity, that's intention. And I want to tell you today, it's okay to admit that. It's okay to call it what it was. We've been trained to soften the blow for others, even while we're bleeding. We try to find reasons to make their betrayal easier to carry. We say things like they were going through something, or maybe I overreacted, or they didn't really mean it. But let me tell you, when someone hurts you with knowledge, when someone breaks you using the very things you once trusted them with, that's not love, that's a weapon. Some of you gave your loyalty to people who only wanted leverage, your secrets to people who saw them as ammunition. You shared your dreams with people who were silently hoping you'd fail. You thought they were listening out of care, but they were listening out of strategy. They weren't trying to get closer to your heart, they were trying to find the cracks, so they could break you where it would hurt the most. And hear me when I say this, you are not foolish for trusting. You are not weak for loving. You are not naive because you believe the best in them. That's not your shame to carry. That's not your guilt to wear. The darkness they carried in their heart is not your burden. What they did was a reflection of them, not a reflection of you. Don't let their actions change your identity. You were honest, you were pure, you were sincere. That's not something to apologize for, that's something to thank God for. That you didn't let this world harden you before that moment, that you were still open enough to care, that you were willing to give love a chance. And yes, it was taken advantage of. Yes, it was misused, but that doesn't mean your heart was in the wrong place. It means their heart was. Some people know exactly what they're doing. They bait you with affection. They cover their intentions with charm. They make promises with no plans to keep them. And then when your guard is down, they strike. That's why it's so confusing, because everything seems so real. And maybe parts of it were, but the hurt, that wasn't spontaneous, it was selected, it was precise. And that's what makes it so hard to forget. But listen closely, God saw it. Even when you didn't. He saw the manipulation, He saw the jealousy. He saw the way they used your goodness against you. And He allowed it to come to light, not to break you further, but to set you free. Because sometimes you can't see the truth until it wounds you. Sometimes it takes pain to wake you up. Sometimes it takes betrayal to make you finally stop explaining away the warning signs. You thought you were in a safe place, but you were in a setup. You thought they had your back, but they were waiting for a moment to twist the blade. That's not just wrong, it's evil. And yet you survived it. You got through it. And now you see clearly. You see who they are. You see what they were doing. And even more than that, you see what God was protecting you from. You see, the enemy doesn't just attack you at random. He uses people who are close. He uses those you trust. He uses those who have access, because betrayal only works when it comes from the inside. But thank God today that what was meant to destroy you failed. What was meant to crush you awakened you. What was meant to break you built a fire inside of you that can't be put out. And maybe they thought you wouldn't recover. Maybe they thought their silence would destroy your self-worth. Maybe they thought you'd keep begging, keep hoping, keep waiting for them to come back, but you didn't. You're still standing, you're still here. And now you know better. Don't ignore the facts. Don't rewrite the story to make it easier to swallow. If they stayed you and still chose to hurt you, that's not someone who deserves another invitation. That's someone God exposed. Let the exposure be enough. Let the truth be enough. Let it open your eyes, not your door. There comes a time when the most godly thing you can do is walk away, not out of hatred, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You don't have to stay in a place where your soul is constantly under attack. You don't have to keep showing up where you're tolerated but never treasured. There's a strength in walking away that many don't understand. It takes courage. It takes obedience. It takes a heart that finally says, no more, not like this. See, the enemy would love nothing more than to keep you stuck in a cycle. A cycle of pain, of apologies without change, of promises that were never meant to be kept. He wants you to believe that staying is noble, that keeping the peace at the cost of your own peace is what love looks like. But love isn't meant to hurt like that. Love builds. Love protects. Love brings clarity, not confusion. And sometimes love for yourself and reverence for God's presence in your life means turning your back on the very people who took you for granted. Some people know you're valuable. They just hope you never realize it. They drain your spirit because they fear what you'll become when you finally stop depending on their approval. They keep you small because your growth threatens their control. And so they smile in your face while slowly crushing your spirit. They call you sensitive when you speak up. They call you selfish when you set a boundary, but they never acknowledge the damage they've done behind closed doors. And still you stayed. You stayed hoping they'd see your heart. You stayed thinking your loyalty would convict them. You stayed believing things would turn around if you just loved harder, prayed harder, gave more of yourself. But there comes a moment when you have to recognize what God is showing you. The healing you're hoping for isn't in staying, it's in leaving. Let me tell you something true. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've grown. It means you've seen enough. It means you've realized that begging for crumbs at a table where God never sat is not your calling. It means you're done trying to convince someone to value what they were supposed to protect. That's not pride, that's clarity. And yes, it'll hurt. Walking away always comes with a cost. You'll grieve what you thought it could be. You'll feel the weight of what you gave, but that pain, it's temporary, it's the sting of release. And on the other side of that pain is peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't depend on someone else's behavior. The kind that allows you to breathe without walking on eggshells. The kind that comes when you finally honor the whisper of the Holy Spirit saying it's time. Some of you have been asking God for peace, and He's been giving you signs. He's been showing you their fruit. He's been exposing their heart. He's been letting things fall apart, not to punish you, but to wake you up. And every time you patch it back together, every time you make excuses for them, every time you try to pretend like it didn't happen, you delay your deliverance. You've been crying over people God already removed His hand from. You've been pleading for restoration when heaven has already closed that chapter. Not every relationship is meant to be revived. Not every door that closes is meant to be reopened. Sometimes the blessing is in the ending. Sometimes the healing begins after the goodbye. And don't let guilt convince you to stay where you're being slowly broken. You don't owe anyone your sanity. You don't owe anyone access to the healed version of you when they contributed to your wounding. If they couldn't love you when you were giving them your all, they don't deserve you now that you found your strength. Let them be shocked. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the silence they created. Your absence will say what your words never could. Your peace will speak louder than any explanation. And trust this, the same God who walked with you through the valley will meet you on the road out. You are not walking away alone. You're walking with purpose. You're walking with protection. You're walking into a promise that can't be fulfilled in a place of pain. Forgiveness is not the same as access. We often confuse the two, especially when our hearts are tender and full of hope. You can forgive someone with all your heart. You can pray for them, release the bitterness and wish them well, and still understand that they have no place in your life anymore. That's not unforgiveness. That's wisdom. Some of us have been taught that forgiveness means going back. That to truly forgive someone, you have to reopen the door, let them in, act like nothing ever happened. But that's not what forgiveness looks like when you're walking with God. Forgiveness means you let go of the weight of offense. It means you no longer carry the anger, the desire for revenge, the need to see them suffer. But it also means you protect the space God has given you. It means you don't hand your peace back to the very person who shattered it. Because here's the truth. Some people only apologize to get back in. Not because they've changed, but because they've noticed you have. They sense the shift. They feel the silence. They see the strength that's growing in your absence. And suddenly they want to circle back, not to honor your healing, but to interrupt it. And that's where discernment becomes your shield. That's where you need to remember forgiveness is free, but access is earned. You don't owe anyone re-entry just because you decided to forgive. Forgiveness is a gift you give for your own freedom. Access is a boundary you set for your protection. And if someone damaged your heart, shattered your trust, played with your sincerity, and they did it intentionally, then it is not your responsibility to give them a second opportunity to do it again. God calls us to forgive, yes, but He never told us to be foolish. He never asked us to leave the gate open to those who walk in only to burn what they didn't build. You can bless someone from a distance. You can intercede for them without letting them back into your inner circle. You can wish them healing while still choosing separation, because some people weren't just a bad season, they were a warning. And the lesson you learned is meant to protect your future. If you let them back in without repentance, without fruit, without change, then what you're doing is not forgiveness, it's self-betrayal. Forgiveness says, I no longer hate you. Wisdom says, I no longer trust you. Both can live together in a healed heart. Both can walk hand in hand when you understand that grace does not mean stupidity. You can be full of mercy and still guard your peace. There are people who know how to say the right words but still carry the same heart. They know how to sound remorseful, but it's not repentance. They're rehearsing, not changing. They're trying to get a reaction, trying to reopen the old door so they can come back in and finish what they started. And if you let them in too soon, if you confuse emotional manipulation with spiritual transformation, you'll find yourself back in the same pit you just climbed out of. That's why God calls us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. It's possible to be loving and discerning, to be kind and cautious, to be merciful and guarded. That's not being cold. That's not being bitter. That's called being a good steward of your soul. The enemy would love for you to confuse forgiveness with passivity, but the Spirit of God teaches you how to forgive without surrendering the boundaries that keep you safe. Listen carefully. The person who broke you doesn't get to define your new season. Just because they're sorry or say they are doesn't mean they're safe. You need to look for fruit. You need to look for humility. You need to see transformation. Not just words, not just tears, not just guilt, but true, consistent change. And until that shows up, they can remain outside the gate of your peace, even as you forgive them in prayer. Forgiveness is about setting yourself free from what they did. But access, that's about who you're becoming now. That's about what God is doing in your life today. That's about making room for the right people, the right voices, the right relationships that nourish your spirit instead of depleting it. So if they come back knocking on the same door they once slammed in your face, you don't have to answer. You don't have to re-explain yourself. You don't have to reopen what God already closed. You can smile with grace, forgive with sincerity, and still say, no, not this time. God is doing something new in me. And let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in guarding your growth. There's no guilt in protecting your purpose. If they truly cared for you, they wouldn't have damaged you in the first place. If they truly respected you, they'd never ask to come back through a door they set on fire. There is something powerful about letting go, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. There are some people who cannot go with you where God is taking you. Their chapter in your life has ended, and trying to force them into your next season is like trying to fit broken glass into a new window. It might look familiar, but it's dangerous, and it won't hold under pressure. You see, there comes a time when you stop hoping they'll see your worth and start walking like you already know it. That's not pride, that's healing. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. You cannot keep pausing your purpose to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot keep begging someone to treat you right when they had every chance and still chose to break you. At some point, you stop answering the phone. You stop checking for a message. You stop waiting for the apology that's never coming, and you look up and say, Lord, I trust you with what's behind me, and I'm ready for what's ahead. And no, it's not easy. It hurts to let go of people you once prayed for. It stings to release someone you thought would be part of your forever. But the truth is, Not everyone is assigned to your destiny. Some people were only meant to walk with you for a season, and when the time is up, it's not your job to carry them into your future. It's your job to obey God even when it feels like loss. And the enemy, he wants you stuck. He wants you stuck in memories. He wants you rehearsing old conversations. He wants you reading between the lines of every text that never came. Why? Because as long as you're looking back, you're not moving.